Michael, your host. The issues concerning tax reform is still ongoing as further deliberations and moved by the National Assembly to set up committee to listen and to also have a balanced concern about the argument, the contribution over the issue of tax reform. That was also deliberated and reiterated earlier today during the plenary at the National Assembly. I just also bring to you that the president is back to the country after visits to France and South Africa, in all of that bilateral relations to the country and tracking some of the development and how we can also enhance a capacity to increase and build upon sustaining our economy. We need to partner with other nations so as to address all of the issues and concern in the country. We need to go into some understanding by MOU in respect to tapping some of our resources. We also need to capitalize on what we have to get what we also want. That was what the president was doing for the past few days, coming from France and back to South Africa. And it looks at this a bit of result from all of that visit the president has embarked on. Recall, for over 18 months in office, there are those that have said the president has traveled so much. But what really is the expectation of Nigerians is what is the result of all of these visitations and travels of the president and all of that. But we'll still track and know after their visit to France and South Africa what may be next for Nigeria. Tonight, everyone, we'll turn attention to the issues of press freedom in the country. We've seen different socio-political development, economic development in the country. We are trying to track what it means for us to have a press that is totally free in the country. This is because the right to freedom of expression is contained in Chapter 4 of the Constitution, that was amended in 1999. And the Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, recently claimed that press freedom in Nigeria is largely free. But it was fact-checked by data file to reveal that this might be the misrepresentation of the fact. According to the Global Data on the Press, in the ranking on the World Freedom Index as of 2024, Nigeria has a press score of 51.03%, placing it within the 40-55 score range, which indicate that the country somehow years ago has some difficult press freedom situation. Because when you look at press freedom, is germane to democracy. We cannot talk of democracy in Nigeria without really talking about the press freedom. The media is expected to be totally free. Journalists should work without fear of attack, because no modern society can thrive without the presence of the media, and none can also function at its best without the press freedom. That means this press freedom ensures that journalists and media outlets can perform their duties without fear or threat of external interferences. A lot of concern about that, and tonight we'll be looking at the factors that may look at mitigating against the press freedom in Nigeria, and what should be the way forward in managing the agitations of people, the people's interests, our movement to getting democracy right after 25 years, the concern about transparency of government, accountability of leaders is still a major concern. That for leaders to work well, there should be checks and balances of all the arms of government, and they should also, people and citizens should hold the leaders accountable at all times so as to get the result. And tonight on the program, we'll be extracting that concern, and also we'll swing it into the defamation charge against Farotimi. Subsequently on the show, I'll be having the National Coordinator of Take It Back Movement will be joining us to give us some understanding about the defamation charge against human rights activist and lawyer Farotimi that has been detained currently in the police custody in Ekiti State. Femi Obere is a public affairs analyst and is my guest tonight to look at the press freedom in Nigeria. Thanks so much, Mr. Femi, for joining us on the program.
Thanks, Michael, for inviting me.
Yes. A lot of concern when it comes to press freedom in the country. We look at the statement made by the minister that we are largely free, but people are rejecting that comment of the minister. For them, it looks we are still having harassment of journalists. We are still not having total freedom. In our work for 25 years, you've seen different political movement in this country. You've also witnessed different agitations in this country. What would be your assessment of what it means to be free, for press?
Well, thanks once again, Mike, for having me. Um, I believe that in order to treat this issue, at least dispassionately speaking, there are two prisms from which we need to look at it. One is that with the minister's statement, the operative word there is largely. And he's not claiming that the press is totally free. He said it is largely free. So you can now wiggle your way. You can actually define what largely means. You can actually put a percentage into that particular word. That's one angle by which we think we should look at it. And then the other one, it seems to me, is that we have to look at where we were when it comes to press freedom, where we are now, and where we ought to be in order to have a better understanding, in my own view. And if I have to take the second prism, and that qualifies, to me, that's perhaps the reason why he used the word largely, because the minister, the Honorable Minister, was looking at where we were and where we are now and where we ought to be. And that's what I think qualifies that word largely. Now, you will agree with me that we've had a checkered history when it comes to either politics and journalism and actually press freedom, relatively speaking. Times were when we had military government for as many years in this country since our flag independence. We had our flag independence now, I believe, give or take, perhaps about 64, 65 years ago, you know, and if you calculate the number of years that the military was in power, you probably will have at least 2/3 of that, you know, since our flag independence. So what that means to me in terms of where we were is that compared with what journalists are doing right now, you couldn't even try that when the military was in the saddle. Are you following me? The many things that we're doing now as journalists, the things that we write about, and the comments that we make, and the people that we call out, either in the public sector or in the private sector, that was a non-starter with the military. But now we have a situation now, thanks also to the social media, to the new media, that everybody now is a journalist in so many ways. And you can say a whole lot of things, even though they may not entirely be true, but you're not going to be arrested for that. Recall the situation of investigative journalism that it is now beginning to shape up in this country. Investigative journalism was a non-starter, even as recently as 1999. You know, you remember Fisayo Sheyombo. It's now the phase of investigative journalism. He just called out the military in terms of the fact that he accused the military because he went undercover to actually see what was going on with all this bunkering and all of that, and he accused the military formation that they were in cahoot with this bunkering and all of that. He accused NAPTIP and he accused so many other agencies, government agencies, that they are in cahoot in this issue of corruption. That would not have been done even as far back as 1999 when we started our democracy. He probably would have been dead by now. But he was arrested and they questioned him and they released him. Are you following me? To continue that very, very deadly business of investigative journalism. So when you look at where we were and where we are, then I think and I believe that the minister probably used that word largely because a lot of things are happening now that journalists are not being arrested. People can kick and scream. The people that are being accused can kick and scream. And why did you say that? Why do you accuse me? But they won't still be arrested. But now the question is, are we where we're supposed to be? no, we're not where we're supposed to be. And to me, it's a work in progress. Look at the Freedom of Information Bill that you alluded to. Yes, it's still in a very teething stage, so to speak, but at least that is an effort towards actually actualizing press freedom. And let me also say this before I wrap up with this particular question, that I don't think there's total press freedom anywhere. I don't believe that. That's my assessment. I spent majority of my life in the United States, about close to 28 years. That's where I went to universities and all of that. I practiced my journalism, if you can use that word, in the US. I didn't practice my journalism here. I was a publisher of a magazine, and I remember I wrote editorials because I was based in Chicago. I remember the very many editorials that I wrote to criticize the government, the local government, the mayor, the local government of my area. I was based in Chicago and all of that. They didn't arrest me, they didn't harass me, but they came to my office to explain themselves that, okay, this is the true situation, you should have checked from us and all of that. And that is not to say that there are other subtle issues out there that when journalists actually step on those issues, that they cannot be taken to task about it.
All right, Mr. Femi, that's a good one. But let me take your mind to a court just recently stopped NBC from imposing fines and threatening, to impose some sanctions on stations. We've also witnessed fines by NBC, harassment of broadcast stations and those concerned, that those are feels that, because if the court had ordered that they should stop using the NBC Act and the code to impose fines and to threaten the sanctions and harass and intimidate the broadcast stations that we have, it looks that they argued that they lack the legal power and authority to impose penalty unlawfully. There was a perception that NBC are extending their hands towards matters sometimes that are not really due for fines and sanctions, because you said you've also witnessed in other crimes what it means. Do you feel within that operations and given room, because some of the information that we do not speak on televisions are what is discussed in social media, and sometimes because of the lack of the freedom that many have to also speak on this platform, they have taken down now, giving social media the credence, the capacity and the ability to delve into issues that ordinary social media wouldn't have taken a bit.
Yes, Mike, that's still what I describe as our growing pain when it comes to press freedom in this country. We still have to put so many things in perspective. And what do I mean by that? Some of our leaders, and I make bold to say that, still has this military mentality. Remember that at least 2 generations, at the very least, have sprang up because of the military interregnum that we had when it concerns leadership and the political economy. So, meaning that, yes, there are still going to be some renegades, if you will, that still doesn't have a good understanding of what it means to have press freedom. But we are in a democracy. The court is now telling some people who might want to run amok, so to speak, with the issue of press freedom, to say, look, we're in a democracy. You can only go so far. So that, to me, is still good. So because the court is now reining some people in and saying, no, you cannot do that. In the case of this fine that you mentioned by the NBC. So what that means to me is that the next time around, when something similar happens in the press establishment, the NBC leadership will be circumspect. That look, we can do this because we have already had a judgment against us. So to me, it is part of the growing pain. It is part of the teething problem that we must go through. And I believe that in a very short time, we are going to get to a sort of a comfort zone, if you will, that we can lay claim, and the journalists can lay claim that there is relatively good press freedom. We haven't gotten there yet, and we are going to get there.
Right. Let's look at the issue of accessibility of information, because sometimes what helps journalists is the facts. And how do you get facts when it's accessible? We've also seen where some journalists have been denied, opportunity to gather some facts. A recent one was that, even if I do not cite the cases, but a concern about accessibility, concern about how informations are available, because sometimes there are those that argue that when government refuse, or when institutions of government or organizations refuse to have made available some of these facts, they now create room for people to make their own interpretation and insinuation. And on the grounds of making your own opinion or basis of your information, you are now, being indicted with one thing or the other, issues of defamations and all of those concerns. How do you manage this? Because we've seen the Information Act, where people can have access to some information, but it looks that institutions in Nigeria is still far from that reality.
Yeah, it is still far from the reality. And let us also take a step back to try to get an understanding of what is going on here. All over the world, the business of government is not necessarily to give you information. The business of government, for the most part, is to hoard information, because there's so many things that government is doing across the board, all over the world, that the government may think that it's actually acting on the interest of the people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the things that it is doing, either overtly or covertly, should be known to those people that it is acting on their interest. So, meaning that it is always going to be a push and pull kind of situation between the media and the government. Media's responsibility is to expose, is for the right of the public to know, whereas the core, not mandate basically, is the core thing of government is necessarily not to let people know, even though the things that they are doing might be in the best interest of the people. So you have this push and pull kind of situation. I think we need to understand that. So it now becomes the responsibility of the media, of the journalists, to go beyond the traditional means of acquiring information or accessing information, and the Freedom of Information Act is one of them. Even though it was started by the federal government, you can count how many state governments in your finger, how that has actually domesticated that Freedom of Information Act in their respective states. And what that means, it seems to me, is that government at some level has been very reluctant, very lethargic, and very wary of releasing information. Not necessarily because the information might be counter productive, but it's natural for them to just say, you know what, if you give this man this information and we don't know how it's going to look, it might use it against us. But I'm not making excuses, but I'm just letting us know that the function of government, for the most part, and the function of the media, for the most part, are actually very countervailing. It runs against the grain, so to speak. So it is now the function, it is now the job of that media, that journalists to actually go beyond all of that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Because I think, for instance, we take for instance the concern of this government, that those that feels the government are not speaking much of the achievements, what their scorecards and all of those concern. It looks that in the media have floated one side of, perception about this government. Those that also feel that way. So when you said government should also hold some information, probably for some sense of managing it well, it gives room for people to feel government are not doing anything, and it creates pressure, because government exists to better the lives of the people and to make things work in the country. How do we manage these interests as well?
You see, to me, that's one of the unfortunate things about the present government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Without being immodest, and I can make bold to say that this is the government that has done so much within a short period of time.
You feel they have done so much?
I'm sorry?
Do you feel they have done so much?
Yeah. I feel very strongly about that this government have done so much to not only to rejig the political and the economic template of this country within a short period of that than the government that we have had since 1999. Unfortunately, and that's the unfortunate side of it, the things that this government has done to elevate, yes, there's hardship, don't get me wrong.
People are sleeping hungry.
Yeah, but then we have to understand where the rain started beating us. And let me finish with this. I feel very strongly that this government has done a lot to actually situate this country, for the most part economically, than the governments before it. But unfortunately, those accomplishments are not being advertised. And sometimes when I look at it, I'm like, is the government not even sure of its own accomplishments? The government should be sure of its own, because if you're not sure of its own of the things that you are doing, you won't be doing them in the first instance. So, to me, we have a situation whereby people are still very much in the dark as to what this government is doing and continues to do. Why that is the case, I don't know, because I am not in government. But you are right. People are not feeling that the government is doing a whole lot, whereas the government is doing a whole lot. So the information management and information dissemination and information awareness in so many levels, even close to the very local level, and by giving people information in their respective dialects and all of that, should not be too much for the government to do. So, but unfortunately, this is not happening, and I believe that
So you feel the media is not fair to the government?
Well, that to me is relative, because
if government are performing, if government are concerned about developing the nations, the projects that means well to the Nigerians, the media ought to have spoken. But if the other flip side, the media has seen that people are really having a tough time with this administration. The policies that have been taken by the government and the reformations, it looks that it is creating more hardship, taking Nigerians backward. I mean, taking Nigerians to some poverty lines and withdrawing those that were even in the middle class back to the lower class. How do we feel that is balancing?
You see, Mike, I want to look at this situation in so many angles, and if I'll do that. See, one is that I'm a media person too, but the media naturally should be wary of government. Are you following me? The media should be wary of government, and they ought to be very suspicious of what government. That's part of that is part of the nature of the job. Not necessarily to the praises of the government. But then see something positive happening, even though they may not be getting the immediate result right now. It is also the responsibility of the media to advertise those things. And let me also go one step further by saying that when you look at when you look at the age bracket of media personalities in this country, I can take you for example. You are probably a baby. There are so many things that you are not aware of in terms of where we are now and where we were before, that to say those things, it will be like news to you, in the sense that this country has been run down for so long by so many people, including governments. And this government is now trying to redraw the map. It's trying to reshape the situation. And there are some things that you don't know because history is not even being taught to begin with in our schools anymore. So the media, as an establishment, the practitioners of the media are not really in the know of some of the things that are happening, because it is just what an average age of a journalist now. I mean,
to the limitation of knowledge. All right, let's get to go on a break. Once we return from the break, we'll wrap up this conversation with Mr. Femi. Do stay with us. I'll be right back. How many thanks for still with us, Rex? The concern about press freedom in Nigeria, what this really means for our political development. I mean, Mr. Femi is still with us here. We're trying to wrap it up. Let's look at issues of the social media transformative impact, because media has now moved to, it's now conversational. People are also having their contribution. They are gone at the days where it was just about passing information, what is about dissemination of information. Now people are engaging with this information. They don't just receive, they also react to them. Sometimes it's taken to the social media. What was discussed on the traditional platform is taken to social media for more, what I call it, banter and all of that in the social media space. In that sense, it has created sometimes a room for, misinformations, because people now use what they have seen, use the information they have seen, use the comment that was made to also have their own reactions. Do you feel that social media indeed is a welcome development to press in Nigeria?
Well, whether it should be a welcome development, Mike, is actually here nor there. There's nothing we can do about it. It has come to stay.
Because we're in the digital time now.
Yeah, because this is the thing. It's the future. But it is now a tougher job for government megaphones. They must continue to stay on their toes.
Is that why we have three spokesmen to the president? Because
it may very well be.
the president have to have a very unprecedented appointment. Yeah. Three spokesmen to one government. Is it because of this?
Perhaps we should have more than that. We should have community engagement spokesperson too, and the people that can translate policies that are done in English into the local languages.
So you support these three spokesmen by the president?
Yes, no doubt, because the times are different. People are engaging government on a constant basis, on a minute by minute basis. Some of these engagements are false, and you have to react to them. Sometimes you have to say, okay, you know what? We have to choose what we react to and what we don't react to. So in my own view, Mike, the government media people must actually be operating 24/7 because of the new situation that we are in.
Very tedious tax on a concern. But before I let you go, what will be the way forward? Because press freedom largely free by the minister, and there are those that are fact-checking the minister and saying that there are some factors that are not in any way enhancing press freedom in Nigeria. We want democracy to thrive, and we've seen also the fact that some persons feel police is not your friend, when ideally there is ideology that police should be your friend. Exactly. Some journalists are not really friendly with the members of the police force. But in a way, how do you feel that we can manage these grievances or interests between the police trying to protect their job and journalists also trying to do their job? We've seen cases even in the protest ground. Sometimes the journalist is trying to cover a protest scene. That those feel journalist is not a protester. He's there to also cover the scene. But we also see, some level of engagement between the police and all of that. How do you manage this concern as we wrap it up?
Well, Mike, we will continue to manage it by way of people trying to be educated. Even the police, without being modest too, some of these people don't really have a good understanding of what their jobs should be. They themselves need training. And the journalists themselves need to be educated some more about what they should do and what they necessarily may not do. So in a nutshell, Mike, I think it will continue to be a push and pull kind of situation. And I believe that in a democracy, as long as we continue to sustain this democracy, things are going to evenly pan out. And it may very well be that the court will be the final arbiter as to who is doing what and who's doing right and who is doing wrong. Just in the case of the fine that the NBC imposed. So the journalists will continue to slug it with government, and they should, because that's among the scope of their job. And the government too should continue to say, you know what, we are reluctant, but since the court says we should do this, we should do that, so we don't have any choice. So it will continue, and at some point we'll go to an even kill.
Government should also acknowledge that journalists are not enemies of government. That's absolutely. Mr. Femi Odere is a public affairs analyst and a senior journalist in this country. Thanks so much for joining us on the show tonight and expressing those concern and interest. Thanks so much. All right, everyone. We'll be turning attention right away to many calls. We've also seen House of Representatives, the caucus of the Labour Party, calling for judicial neutrality and impartiality and fair hearing in the contentious defamation case that have been brought against the human rights lawyer Dele Farotimi by Chief Afe Babalola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. The caucus told their leader, Afam, also noted democracy is under threat when democratic institutions are manipulated against the people by the highly placed individuals. For now, the national coordinator will be joining us virtually on the show of Take It Back movement. He will be extreming this concern. What is this information? What does it really mean? We've also seen more for people to protest against the detention of Mr. Dele. We're going to break, and once we return from the break, we'll be discussing that on the program. Just stay with us. Subsequently, we'll be having you. So you can also refer some of our good analysts to us because okay. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much. I will appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Well, the judiciary remains the last bastion of hope for all citizens in democratic society. Such that judiciary upholds the principle of impartiality and neutrality at all times. That is a statement that has also been made from the leaders of Labour Party in the House of Representatives concerning the detention of Mr. Samuel Louis, the national coordinator, Take It Back movement, joins us from Lagos. Thanks so much, Mr. Joan. A lot of concern. Neutrality of the process. We've seen that those that have argued from this civil case, those that are also concerned, the lawyer, Mr. Farotimi, ought to understand what defamation in context also mean. What do you feel are the concern and interest behind this detention? Mr. Juma, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, yes. I said I think it's an unfortunate situation we find ourselves, and it rather calls for a deeper reflection on the. It further calls for a deeper reflection on this state of human rights in Nigeria, and it confirms everything we've always said with regards to the character of institutions, the police, the EFCC, the judiciary. Fundamentally, as addressed even in Dele Farotimi's book itself, all of these institutions have become institutions that protect the interest of the state, politicians, and rich people as against those of ordinary people. You will recall Afe Babalola is not only standing on the wrong side of history for the very first time. I mean, it was Obasanjo, it was equally Obasanjo's lawyer at the then Justice Okuta panel. So it's the where people like Afe Babalola stand is clear. So, but the point is that the reason they arrested Dele Farotimi, and the reason is the same reason they've been the regime of Tinubu have been going after protesters, have been going after journalists, and the fundamental reason is to subvert not just the truth, but keep Nigerians keep Nigerians perpetually enslaved, to poverty and to their impunity. So what we have at play here is a system that is a reflection of a system that had been designed in impunity, and it is unfortunate that people like Afe Babalola and many other rich men have continued to manipulate this system and use it in service of to serve personal interest. I think it's unfortunate that state institutions are degenerated to this level, and it is high time Nigerians come out in protest. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, sorry. So I think it's high time Nigerians start organizing to reject all of this, to reject stop the perpetual harassment of journalists, of critics, of even the civic space generally. I think we should be very much afraid that what awaits us is a future that is grounded in total dictatorship and abject poverty, where the mass of our people would not even be able to complain, even as the wide dying. And it is the reason, and it is a consistent tradition of impunity of the Nigerian state going after critics. It's why we have what we call the graveyard silence amidst the hardship the Nigerian people had been facing. So we can't continue.
All right, Mr. Juwana, I'll be back to you. I'll be back to you in respect to that, because there are a lot of concern and criticism behind these actions by the judiciary. That those that also argue that he is wrongly remanded and detained in a custody in the case. But let's get to go on a very quick break, everyone. And once we return, I will complete that conversation on the program. Just stay with us.